She was just a homeless girl, scraping by, trying to make it through another night. Then, she ended up saving a dying kid in some back alley and made a desperate phone call. What she didn't know was that the voice on the other end belonged to the Vampire King, and her blood held a 300-year-old secret, one that would make her the most hunted person in the whole city. The rain tasted like rust and old regrets. Sarah pressed herself against the crumbling brick wall of the abandoned 7th Street subway entrance, her threadbare jacket offering zero protection against the raw, cold October downpour. Thunder boomed across Dusk Vale City's jagged skyline, and somewhere out there in the darkness, glass shattered. She should have stayed at the shelter, but the shelter meant questions. Questions about the bruises blossoming on her arms. Questions about why a 17-year-old was all alone in the world. Questions she had no decent answers for. The streets were simpler in a twisted way. Cruel but simple. Her stomach growled. A loud, complaining rumble. 3 days since her last real meal. The dumpster behind Chen's noodle house would be picked clean by now, but maybe. A scream tore through the night. Safety rule number 1 in Duskvale, you learned fast. Other people's problems got you killed quicker than anything else. The city's underground belonged to gangs, dealers, and things even worse than both. Things with skin so pale it was almost translucent and eyes that burned red. Things the politicians swore up and down didn't exist. Another scream, younger this time, laced with raw desperation. Damn it all to hell. Sarah's feet started moving before her brain could even try to put a stop to them. She grabbed a rusted pipe from the rubble and ran headfirst toward the sound. Her worn sneakers splashing through rain puddles that reflected the flickering streetlights like a million shattered mirrors. The old subway platform yawned open before her, a concrete throat leading straight down into the guts of the earth. The screaming came from below. She descended the broken escalator 2 steps at a time, her heart hammering against her ribs. At the bottom, 3 hulking figures surrounded something small and pale on the ground. Men in black leather jackets, their faces hidden behind bandanas, were taking turns kicking at a girl, maybe 12 years old, who was curled up in a tight ball, arms wrapped protectively around her head. Her dress was expensive, silk or something damn close to it, now torn and caked in mud. Totally out of place in this forgotten part of town. Stop! Sarah's voice cracked, strained, but she raised the pipe anyway, holding it high. The largest of the thugs turned toward her, his laugh a wet, ugly sound. Well, well, well. Looks like we got ourselves another do-gooder, boys. This city's just crawling with stupid. The pipe connected with his knee with a satisfying, sickening crunch. He went down hard, screaming and clutching his leg. The other 2 rushed her. But years of fighting for sleeping spots and scraps of stolen food had taught her things no fancy school ever could. She ducked low, drove her elbow with brutal force into one man's throat, used his momentum to throw him headfirst into his partner. They scrambled back up, eyes wild with a mix of rage and fear. One of them pulled a knife, the blade glinting ominously in the dim light. Not worth it, not for her. The one with the crushed knee gasped, a strangled sound of pain. Let's go. Now. They fled, cursing, leaving their knife and their bruised pride behind them. Sarah dropped the pipe, her hands shaking now, trembling uncontrollably. The girl on the ground hadn't moved, hadn't even twitched. Hey! Sarah knelt beside her, her voice softer now. They're gone. You're safe now. You're... The girl looked up. Wrong. Everything about her face was wrong, disturbingly so. Beautiful in a way that almost hurt to look at directly. Porcelain skin so fine it looked like it could shatter at any moment. Eyes too large and too dark, lips bloodless and pale. And when she opened her mouth, Sarah saw the teeth. Sharp, pointed, slightly too long. Help? The girl whispered, her voice raspy and weak. Please. Then Sarah saw the wound. A gash across the girl's shoulder leaking silver. Not red, but silver. Like liquid moonlight pooling on the stained concrete. The metallic smell filled the air, sweet and sickeningly toxic. What are you? Sarah reached out instinctively, pressing her hand against the wound, trying to stanch the flow of blood. Pain exploded through her palm, a searing, agonizing fire. Sarah screamed, trying to pull away, but the silver blood clung to her skin like burning ice, refusing to let go. Symbols erupted across her hand, ancient markings that glowed with a pale, otherworldly fire, crawling up her wrist like living tattoos. The pain twisted, intensified, then morphed into something else entirely, something that reached deep inside her chest and squeezed, twisting her insides into knots. Images flooded her mind, visions she couldn't comprehend. A woman in full battle armor kneeling before a throne made of bones. A crown of shadows. Promise written in blood, spanning centuries. The girl grabbed Sarah's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. The marks? You're supposed to be dead. Confused, disoriented, Sarah stammered, I don't understand. What did you do to me? The girl coughed, more silver blood bubbling on her lips. The Covenant. It recognized you. She was fading fast, her already pale skin turning translucent, almost see-through. Dying. Sarah's hands moved on their own, as if guided by some unseen force, searching the girl's pockets. A shattered phone, a small velvet pouch, empty and useless. Then, her fingers brushed against something cold, hanging from the girl's neck. Pendant, a small charm. Black metal intricately carved with symbols that matched the ones now burning on Sarah's skin. On the back, a single line of text was engraved in silver. Emergency contact, King Lucan. Below it, a phone number. King. Sarah looked at the dying girl, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. Who are you? Lyra. The girl breathed, her voice barely audible. Princess Lyra. Please call him. A princess, a vampire princess. And Sarah, who'd been invisible her entire life, was holding on to her only lifeline. The smart move was to walk away, disappear back into the tunnels, as if she'd never been there, never seen anything. Let the vampires handle their own damn problems. But the girl Lyra was looking at her with eyes full of fear. Yes, but also something else. Recognition. Like she knew Sarah. Like she'd been actively looking for her. Please, Lyra whispered again, her voice weak and fading. Sarah pulled out her ancient flip phone, a donated piece of junk that barely held a charge. The screen cracked and faded. Her hands, still glowing with those impossible marks, trembled as she dialed the number. 1 ring, 2. On the 3rd ring, the air temperature plummeted, dropping 20 degrees in an instant. Sarah's breath came out in white clouds of vapor. The lights flickered violently, then died completely, plunging the platform into absolute darkness, broken only by the eerie glow emanating from her marked hand. Then, a voice answered, deep, ancient, and cold as a tomb that had been sealed for 1,000 years. Who dares use this line? Sarah's throat went dry, her voice a hoarse whisper. There's a girl. She's hurt, she said to call. Where is my daughter? The words carried a weight that pressed against Sarah's chest like a physical force, suffocating her. She looked down at Lyra, whose eyes had now fluttered closed. 7th Street subway, old platform. She's bleeding silver, and I think she's... Do not let her die. The command crackled with raw power, a palpable force. If she dies, I will paint this city in blood and bone. Do you understand me, human? I'm trying to... She managed, her voice trembling. The line went dead, cutting off the connection. The marks on Sarah's hand pulsed once, twice, then began to burn brighter, the light intensifying. The air split with a sound like tearing fabric, and shadows poured into the subway station like liquid night, engulfing everything. From those shadows, figures emerged, tall, impossibly fast, their eyes glowing red in the utter darkness. Vampires, real vampires, and they were all looking directly at her. The largest one stepped forward, sniffing the air like a predator, his lips curling back from his fangs in a silent snarl. She carries royal blood, he snarled, his voice a low growl. The human carries royal blood. Sarah looked down at her glowing hand, then at the unconscious princess, then back at the circle of predators closing in around her. For the first time in her short, hard life, Sarah understood what it meant to have fate notice you, and she realized with crystal clarity that she should have stayed at the goddamn shelter. The sentinel's words hung in the air like a death sentence, a pronouncement of doom. She carries royal blood. Sarah's back slammed against the cold concrete pillar behind her. 5 vampires formed a tight semicircle, cutting off every possible escape route. Their movements were wrong, too fluid, too silent, like watching smoke twist and writhe, taking human shape. I just helped her. Sarah's voice came out surprisingly steady, despite the raw terror clawing at her throat. I called you people. I saved her life. You touched her. The lead sentinel moved closer, his pale face twisted with disgust and something else. Something that looked disturbingly like fear. No human survives contact with royal silver blood. Yet you stand here, marked and breathing. He reached out, his hand moving toward her throat with terrifying speed. The marks on Sarah's palm flared white-hot, a blinding flash of light. The sentinel hissed and jerked back, smoke rising from his fingertips where they'd come close to her skin. Impossible, he breathed, his voice filled with disbelief. Enough, Marcus. The new voice didn't seem to come from any specific direction. It came from everywhere, from the walls, the shadows, the air itself. The temperature plummeted even further, dropping to an almost unbearable level. Sarah's breath crystallized in mid-exhale, tiny flakes of ice forming on the broken tiles beneath her feet. The darkness at the far end of the platform began to shift and writhe. It didn't walk, it manifested, coalescing from shadow into solid form, from form into undeniable presence. He was tall, impossibly so, draped in a black coat that seemed woven from the very fabric of midnight itself, with silver hair that fell past his shoulders like a shimmering waterfall of moonlight. His face could have been carved from marble by a master artist who understood both beauty and unfathomable cruelty. But his eyes, God, his eyes were the color of old blood, and when they fixed on Sarah, she felt the crushing weight of centuries pressing down on her very soul. King Lucian had arrived. He moved past his sentinels without even acknowledging their presence, kneeling gracefully beside Lyra. His hand hovered over her wound, not touching it, and Sarah watched his jaw tighten, the only crack in his otherwise inhuman composure. Who did this? His voice was quiet now, almost a whisper, which somehow made it even more terrifying. 3 men human, Sarah managed to stammer. They ran north when I fought them off. You fought them. Lucian's eyes slid to her, and Sarah felt like a pinned insect, squirming under glass. A homeless kid fought off 3 grown men. It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway, compelled to speak the truth. I am Scrappy. Something flickered across his face, a fleeting expression. Surprise, maybe, or even a hint of amusement. It vanished quickly, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. He lifted Lyra effortlessly, cradling her gently against his chest as if she weighed nothing at all. The silver blood stopped flowing where he touched her, sealing itself through the sheer force of his will. She'll live, he stated, his voice firm. The poison was crude, meant to weaken, not kill. Poison. Sarah's stomach dropped, plummeting like a stone. I touched her blood. Am I? Look at your hand, child. Sarah did. The marks were fading now, sinking beneath her skin, but she could still feel them burning in her bones. A constant, persistent ache. Where the silver blood had touched her, her skin was unmarked, completely healed. Royal blood recognizes its sworn protectors, Lucian said softly, studying her with unsettling intensity. The Arden line was exterminated 200 years ago. Every man, woman, and child erased from history. He tilted his head, his gaze piercing. Yet here you stand, wearing their mark. Explain. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah's hand instinctively drifted to the rusty knife she kept hidden in her jacket pocket. She knew it wouldn't do much good against actual vampires, but holding it made her feel just a tiny bit less powerless. A small act of defiance against the impossible situation she found herself in. I'm nobody. I've been nobody my whole life. Nobody? Lucian repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. He took a step closer, and Sarah's instincts screamed at her to run, to get as far away from him as humanly possible. Then why does my daughter's blood call to you? Why do you bear the covenant mark? Why? He stopped abruptly, his nostrils flaring slightly, as if he'd caught a scent on the wind. His eyes widened just a fraction. You don't know, he whispered, almost to himself. You truly don't know what you are. Before Sarah could even begin to formulate a response, Marcus stepped forward, his face etched with concern. My lord, the sun rises in 40 minutes. We must return to the sanctuary. As if summoned by his words, the faintest hint of gray light began to creep into the eastern sky, visible through the grates above the subway platform. Lucian's expression hardened, his face tightening. He looked at Sarah, then at the approaching dawn, calculation flickering behind those ancient eyes. Take the girl, he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Marcus moved towards Sarah with predatory speed, his movements lightning fast. She pulled the knife, slashing wildly, blindly, but he was so much faster, so much stronger. The mark on her palm exploded with light, a blinding flash. Marcus screamed, thrown backward as if struck by an invisible fist, tumbling across the platform. The other sentinels rushed forward, but every time they came close to Sarah, that light pulsed, a wave of pure energy, driving them back, repelling them. Lucian watched this with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Fascinating. Stay away from me. Sarah backed away toward the broken escalator, toward the growing light above. You can run, little protector, Lucian said, his form already beginning to dissolve, flickering like a dying flame as the sun climbed higher in the sky. But you're bound to us now. The mark will call to you. My enemies will hunt you. And when they find you, and they will find you, you'll have nowhere to go but to me. His body scattered into swirling shadows, dissipating into nothingness. But his voice lingered, echoing in the cavernous space. Run while you can. When you're ready to learn the truth about who you really are, speak my name 3 times in the darkness. I'll come. Then he was gone, vanished, taking Lyra and his sentinels with him, leaving Sarah alone in the cold gray dawn with a burning hand and a million unanswered questions. She ran. Sarah ran for 3 days straight. She switched neighborhoods every 6 hours, never sleeping in the same place twice. The homeless shelters were definitely out of the question. Too many eyes, too many prying questions about the girl who'd gone into the subway and come out glowing. She stuck to the industrial zone on Dusk Vale's south side, where the factories had shut down and closed their doors 20 years ago, and the only permanent residents were rats and ghosts. The marks on her hand had faded to thin, silvery scars, but they itched constantly, a persistent, maddening sensation, like something living beneath her skin, trying desperately to claw its way out. On the 3rd night, while hiding in an abandoned textile factory, Sarah realized with a chilling certainty that she wasn't alone anymore. They found her at 2 a.m. Not vampires this time. Human hunters, the kind who sold vampire parts on the black market and didn't ask any uncomfortable questions about witnesses. 6 of them, armed to the teeth with crossbows and silver-tipped bolts. There she is, the leader grinned, his teeth glinting with gaudy gold caps. The girl with royal blood. You know how much you're worth? Enough to retire on, sweetheart. Sarah bolted for the back exit, running for her life. An arrow whistled past her ear, embedding itself in the rotting door frame with a sickening thud. She dove headfirst through a broken window, hit the ground rolling, and scrambled to her feet, running blindly into the maze of rusted machinery and decaying conveyor belts. Spread out, the leader shouted, his voice echoing through the cavernous factory. Boss wants her alive. But nobody said she needed all her limbs intact. Damn it all. Her vision blurred, the edges fading. She hadn't eaten a decent meal in 2 days, and her body was running on fumes and raw fear. She ducked desperately behind a massive, looming loom, trying to quiet her ragged, shallow breathing. This is how I die, she thought, the grim realization settling heavily on her chest. hunted like an animal in a factory. Then she heard it, a whisper, soft as silk, coming from somewhere deep inside her own head. Down. Go down into the earth where they cannot follow. Sarah's eyes snapped wide open, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was female, ancient, and utterly foreign, yet somehow strangely familiar, like remembering a vivid dream from her long-forgotten childhood. Who? There is a door beneath the eastern corner. Find it quickly. She had no logical reason to trust a disembodied voice in her head, but she sure as hell didn't have any good reason to stay put and wait to die either. Sarah crept silently through the towering machinery, keeping low, trying to stay out of sight. The eastern corner was blocked by a collapsed shelving unit, but behind it, half buried in rubble and debris, she found it, a metal hatch with a rusted wheel lock. The hunter's heavy footsteps echoed closer, pounding on the concrete floor. Sarah grabbed the wheel and pulled with all her strength. It didn't budge, frozen in place by years of neglect and rust. She tried again, putting her full weight into it, and felt something in her palm flare hot, a surge of heat. The marks, they were glowing again, and where her hands touched the cold metal, the rust flaked away like ash, crumbling into dust. The wheel turned, grinding and protesting. The hatch creaked open, revealing a ladder that descended into absolute, impenetrable darkness. Sarah didn't hesitate for a single second. She climbed down blindly, trusting her instincts, and pulled the hatch shut tight above her just as she heard the hunters reach the corner. Where'd she go? Check everywhere. She can't just vanish. Sarah descended into the inky blackness, counting rungs, trying to keep her wits about her. 20, 50, 100. The ladder ended abruptly at a narrow tunnel. Old sewers, judging by the overwhelming stench, but the stonework was strange. Too old, too deliberately carved. Follow the marks on the walls. The voice whispered urgently in her head. I will guide you home. Home? Sarah whispered back, her voice echoing eerily in the confined space. I don't have a home. You have always had a home. You simply forgot it. The tunnel walls bore symbols, the same ones that had appeared on her hand, those ancient markings. They glowed faintly in the darkness, like luminescent moss, creating a faint, ethereal path through the winding, labyrinthine tunnels. Sarah followed them blindly for what felt like hours, her mind drifting in and out of strange, fragmented visions. A woman in gleaming silver armor, kneeling reverently before a vampire king. I pledge my bloodline to yours, my lord, until the last generation. A child, Sarah herself, being carried through rain-soaked streets, held in hands she couldn't quite see. Forget. You must forget everything. It's the only way to keep you safe. Fire. Screaming. Her mother's face, contorted with fear. No, not her mother. Someone else, a stranger, crying hysterically as she pushed Sarah, a tiny baby, into a stranger's arms. Run. Don't look back. Never look back. Sarah stumbled, catching herself against the damp, cold wall. Her head pounded, throbbing with pain. Were these actual memories? Hallucinations brought on by exhaustion? The poison finally taking effect and driving her insane? The tunnel opened suddenly into a large chamber, circular in shape, with a domed ceiling covered in constellations that glowed with their own soft, ethereal light. In the center of the chamber sat an old man, or at least something that had once been a man. His skin was weathered and thin, stretched taut over bone, and his eyes were clouded with age, but he looked up sharply when Sarah entered, as if he could see her perfectly despite his failing eyesight. You're late, he said, his voice crackling like ancient paper. I've been waiting 17 years. Sarah's hand instinctively went to her hidden knife, her senses on high alert. Who are you? I am Silas Arden, the last keeper of your bloodline secrets. He smiled sadly, a network of wrinkles crinkling around his faded eyes. And I'm here to tell you, child, that everything you think you know about yourself is a lie. Behind Sarah, the tunnel filled with the sounds of snarling and howling. The hunters had found the hatch. They were getting closer. Silas stood up, surprisingly spry for a man his age. Come with me. We have very little time, and you have much to learn before they kill us both. Silas moved faster than any old man had any right to, pressing a hidden lever on the chamber wall. A section of stone slid silently aside, revealing another passage, another escape route. How did the hunters find you so quickly? He asked, ushering Sarah through the opening. I've been careful. Your mark, Sarah, Silas said, sealing the passage behind them. It calls to those who know how to listen. Every vampire, every blood trader, every mercenary with the right equipment can feel you, sense you like a beacon now. The new tunnel led sharply upward, ending abruptly in what looked like the basement of an abandoned building. Silas lit an oil lamp and Sarah saw that they were in some kind of makeshift safe house. A single Spartan room with a cot, shelves crammed with old books, and medical supplies that looked like they belonged in a museum. Sit, Silas commanded, pulling out bandages and strange bottles filled with luminescent liquid. Let me see your hand. Sarah sat down heavily, exhaustion finally catching up with her, weighing her down. You said you've been waiting 17 years for me. For you? Or someone like you? Silas unwrapped her palm gently, examining the silver scars with knowing eyes. The Arden bloodline was supposed to end the night your family was murdered. But your mother, clever woman, she hid you in plain sight, made you invisible, a homeless nobody. The words hit her like physical blows, each one a punch to the gut. My mother, I don't remember her. I've been in the system since I was 2. Because she made sure you'd forget. A blood spell, cast with her dying breath, to erase your identity, your memories, your very existence from the vampire's sight. Silas poured the glowing liquid over her scars. It burned intensely, a searing pain, but the constant, maddening itching finally stopped, the relief almost overwhelming. It worked, at least for 15 years. Then you turned 17. What happens at 17? The Covenant awakens. Silas sat back, his clouded eyes somehow looking right through her, seeing things she couldn't even imagine. Your ancestor, Elena Arden, made a blood oath with King Lucian 300 years ago. Her line would protect his heir, and in return, his line would protect hers. But the oath required a sacrifice. Every generation, one Arden child would be bound to the vampire royal family at 17. Their blood mingling, their fates intertwining. Sarah's stomach churned, a wave of nausea washing over her. Bound how? You become their shield, their sword, their guardian. In exchange, you gain abilities no human should possess. Strength, speed, the power to command vampire essence itself. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. But there's a cost. The bond is permanent. Once awakened, you cannot hide from it. And Princess Lyra's blood touching yours, that completed the ritual, whether you wanted it or not. The room spun around her, the floor tilting precariously. Sarah gripped the edge of the cot tightly, knuckles white. I didn't ask for this. I just helped a girl who was dying. Fate doesn't ask permission. Silas stood up, pulling a worn leather-bound book from the shelf. Your name isn't whatever the foster system called you. You are Sarah Arden, last daughter of the Protector line. And right now, you're the most valuable piece on a very dangerous board. He opened the book to a page marked with dried blood, the pages brittle with age. Sarah saw a detailed family tree, the names painstakingly written in shimmering silver ink. At the bottom, a single, stark line. Sarah Arden, born October 13, 2008. Status: hidden. Why are you telling me this now? Sarah's voice shook, barely a whisper. Why not find me years ago? Because I couldn't. Your mother's spell hid you even from me. Silas's expression softened, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. But when you touched Lyra, the spell shattered. Now everyone knows you exist, and there are forces within the vampire court who would rather see you dead than risk what you represent. Which is what? Hope? Change? The end of their power? He closed the book with a snap, the sound echoing in the small room. Lucian's generals have been planning a coup for decades. They want to break the old oaths, start a war with humanity, and establish a new order built on blood and domination. But they can't move against Lucian directly. The ancient magic protecting him is too strong. Unless they eliminate his sworn protector. Sarah finished, understanding dawning, the pieces finally starting to fall into place. Me? You're learning. Silas pulled out a small vial filled with shimmering silver liquid. Vampire blood, but different from Lyra's. Darker, almost black. Drink this. What? No way. It's not poison. It's memory. He pressed the vial firmly into her hands. Pieces of your mother's last thoughts, preserved in my blood. If you want to understand what you're truly capable of, you need to remember who you were meant to be. Sarah stared at the vial, her mind racing. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her not to trust this, not to drink vampire blood, not to dive any deeper into a world that had already tried to kill her 3 times in 3 days. But then she thought of Lyra's wide, frightened eyes, of Lucian's chilling words. You'll have nowhere to go but to me. Of 17 long years spent invisible, worthless, forgotten. Maybe it was time to be seen, to finally matter. Sarah uncorked the vial, took a deep breath, and drank. The world exploded into a chaotic rush of memory and fire, overwhelming her senses. She saw her mother fighting off vampires in a burning house, protecting her at all costs. Saw herself as a baby being carried through the pouring rain, passed from hand to hand. Saw Elena Arden kneeling before a younger Lucian, binding their bloodlines together with an oath that shook the very foundations of reality. And she felt it, the power, sleeping dormant in her veins for all these years, ancient and terrible and undeniably hers. When Sarah finally opened her eyes, they glowed with a faint, pale silver light. Good, Silas said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. Now you're ready, because King Lucian is coming for you tonight, and you need to decide. Will you run forever, or will you finally face your destiny? Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and deep purple. They came for her at midnight, not violently this time, no breaking down doors or drawn weapons. Instead, a formal carriage pulled up silently outside the safe house, black lacquered and gleaming, drawn by horses that moved without making a single sound, their hooves muffled. A single vampire stood beside the carriage, dressed in crimson livery, holding a sealed letter. Silas opened the door before they even had a chance to knock. The king's summons, the messenger said, offering the letter with a slight bow. Miss Arden's presence is required at court. Immediately, Sarah, still reeling from the flood of memories coursing through her mind, stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. And if I refuse, then the king will come himself, and he will not be pleased. The messenger's eyes flicked briefly to Silas, a fleeting look of disdain. The court awaits. They are eager to meet the last. Remember what I taught you, Silas whispered urgently, his voice low. Keep your head down. Speak only when spoken to. And whatever you do, don't show fear. They can smell it. Sarah climbed into the carriage before her courage could fail her completely. The door shut with a soft click, sealing her fate. With a final, decisive click, their journey plunged them beneath the city, navigating tunnels that defied logic, and bypassing checkpoints manned by vampires clad in antiquated armor. Finally, the carriage ground to a halt before imposing bronze doors, etched with scenes depicting the age-old conflict between humans and vampires, tales of blood oaths and shattered kingdoms. The doors swung inward. Sarah gasped, completely captivated by the vampire court's sheer majesty. Constructed within the excavated remains of a cathedral, now buried deep beneath the city ruins, it was a cavern of both breathtaking beauty and lurking menace. Chandeliers crafted from crystallized blood hung suspended from the soaring ceilings. At the far end, the throne stood a chair hewn from a single block of obsidian, bound by silver chains that throbbed with restrained power. And filling the vast expanse in between were vampires. Hundreds of them, both ancient and newly turned, nobles and warriors alike, all pivoting to fix their gazes on the human girl being escorted down the central aisle. Sarah could practically feel their hunger, a palpable pressure in the air. Lucian occupied the throne, with Lyra seated beside him in a smaller chair. The princess appeared healthier now, though still retaining a pallid complexion. Their eyes met, and Lyra offered a slight nod. Acknowledgement, perhaps even a hint of gratitude. But the rest of the court exuded an aura of stark hostility. "She walks our sacred halls," a vampire in crimson robes hissed, "polluting the air with her human stench. The Arden line is extinct," another added, a general by the looks of his military decorations. "This girl is an impostor, my lord. Let me prove it with steel." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to the knife Silas had gifted her, its silver edge inscribed with protective runes. It wasn't much of a defense against a room teeming with vampires, but it was better than nothing. Silence descended. Lucian's voice sliced through the murmuring like a sharpened blade. "General Thurin, do you question my judgment?" The general, a hulking figure of muscle bearing a network of scars across his pale face, bowed stiffly. "I question the wisdom of resurrecting a failed experiment. The protector line served its purpose and died. Why drag this child into our politics?" "Because the covenant has awakened," Lucian stated, rising to his feet. He descended the steps, circling Sarah like a predator assessing its prey. "Show them." At first Sarah didn't understand. Then Lucian's eyes flicked toward her palm. With trembling fingers, she held up her hand. The scars blazed silver, reacting to Lucian's presence, coalescing into symbols that hovered in the air between them. A contract etched in light and blood. The court gasped in unison. "Impossible," someone breathed. "The covenant mark. It's real." "This proves nothing," another stepped forward. "Any blood which could fabricate such marks. Test her properly, my lord. Let her face the trial of binding. If she truly possesses the protector's gift, she'll survive. If not," he smiled, baring his fangs, "her death will at least entertain us." Lucian studied Sarah, his expression unreadable. "The trial hasn't been conducted in 2 centuries. It was banned for being too brutal. Yet it remains our law," another council member interjected. "If she claims Arden heritage, let her prove it the old way." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She had no idea what this trial entailed, but the eager expressions plastered on the vampires' faces told her enough. "Father, no." Lyra stood, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "She saved my life. That should be proof enough." "Your gratitude is noted, daughter." Lucian's tone softened slightly, "but the council is correct. If Sarah Arden is to stand as your protector, the court must witness her bond validated by ancient law." He turned to Sarah, and for a fleeting moment, she glimpsed something in his eyes, not quite sympathy, but a form of understanding. "I cannot change what must be done. But know this, I have seen the mark respond to you. I believe you are who you claim to be." "I didn't claim anything," Sarah retorted through gritted teeth. "You people dragged me here." A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the court. Humans simply didn't address the king in such a manner. Lucian's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. "Spirited. Like your ancestor." He raised his voice. "The trial will commence at dawn. Sarah Arden, you will face 3 tests. Mind, body, and blood. Pass them and you take your place as sworn protector. Fail." He paused. "Pray you don't fail." Thurin grinned viciously. "I volunteer to administer the tests." "Denied," Lucian stated flatly. "I will conduct the trial myself." The general's face darkened with displeasure, but he bowed his head. "As you command." As guards escorted Sarah to a chamber to await the dawn, she caught Lyra's eye one last time. The princess mouthed 2 words, "I'm sorry." Sarah found herself locked in a stone room, devoid of windows, illuminated only by a single candle. She sat on the cold floor, Silas's knife resting across her lap, and braced herself for whatever was to come. From outside, she could hear members of the court placing wagers on how long she would last. But the trial never came. At dawn, Lucian entered Sarah's cell alone, moving with an air of urgent purpose. Get up. Plans have changed. Sarah scrambled to her feet, knife held at the ready. The trial is postponed. We have a more pressing problem. He tossed her a cloak, a dark fabric that shimmered like oil. My spies report unusual activity in the human blood markets. Someone is selling quantities of royal essence. That should be impossible. Sarah pulled on the cloak, her expression confused. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Only 3 sources exist for royal vampire blood. Myself, Lyra, and now you. His eyes bore into hers. Through the covenant bond, someone is either draining Lyra without my knowledge, which seems unlikely given she's under constant guard, or, he paused, they're preparing to drain you. The words took a moment to sink in. You think someone in your court is planning to capture me and sell my blood? Not just someone. Someone with enough power to access the markets, enough knowledge to know your value, and enough ambition to risk my wrath. Lucian fastened his own cloak. We're going to the trade district. You're going to help me find them. Why would I help you? Because if I don't find the traitor first, you'll spend the rest of your very short life in a blood farm, being drained dry. He opened the door. And because, despite what you think of me, I keep my oaths. Your ancestor bound her line to mine. I will not see that sacrifice wasted. Something in his voice compelled Sarah to believe him. They departed through hidden passages, bypassing the court altogether. Lucian produced false documents identifying them as blood merchants from the Northern Territories. He even provided Sarah with colored contacts to conceal the silver glow that now permanently marked her eyes. Stay close and say nothing, he instructed as they entered the trade district. These people traffic in flesh and pain. They will see you as prey. The blood markets thrived in Duskill's underbelly, a labyrinthine network of tunnels beneath the slaughterhouse district, where humans and vampires conducted illicit business. Here, vampire blood was sold for human experimentation. Human blood was sold to vampire addicts. And in the darkest corners, living bodies were auctioned off to the highest bidder. Sarah's stomach churned at the sights that greeted her. Caged humans, their arms covered in bite marks. Vampires chained in silver, weakened and helpless, being harvested like cattle. Children, both human and vampire, with hollow eyes devoid of all hope. This is your world, she whispered to Lucian, unable to mask her disgust. This is our world, he corrected coldly. Humans built this market as much as vampires. Don't pretend you're the kind, innocent victims. He was right, and Sarah resented him for it. They navigated through the throngs of people. Lucian's presence commanded respectful nods from merchants who didn't recognize him, but sensed the palpable aura of power that radiated from him. He stopped at a stall displaying vials of glowing liquid vampire essence, labeled according to age and potency. Any royal stock? Lucian inquired casually. The merchant, a wiry man with gold teeth, leaned in close. Might have something rare. Expensive. Show me. The man retrieved a vial from beneath his counter. The liquid inside glowed brighter than the rest, a pure, shimmering silver, identical to Lyra's blood. Lucian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Where did you acquire this? Private seller, connected to the vampire court. If you believe the rumors, the merchant grinned, said there's more coming. Much more. Some big operation starting soon. Sarah felt it then. A pull in her chest, sharp and undeniable. The mark on her palm burned intensely. She looked at the vial and knew, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that the blood inside was connected to her somehow. Not Lyra's blood, but something else entirely. It's fake, Sarah heard herself say. That's not royal blood. The merchant's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What would you know about it? Sarah snatched the vial. The instant her skin made contact with the glass, the liquid inside turned black and dissolved into smoke. The mark on her palm flared, and suddenly visions flooded her mind. The blood's true source. A laboratory. Vampires in chains. A figure in a surgical mask extracting blood and mixing it with chemicals. And standing in the shadows, watching with an expression of satisfaction. General Theron. She gasped, dropping the vial. It shattered on the ground. The girl's a blood reader, someone shouted. She exposed his product. The merchant lunged at Sarah with a blade. Lucien seized his wrist and twisted. The sickening crack of breaking bone echoed through the tunnel. The merchant screamed in agony. Run, Lucien said urgently. They didn't run, they flew through the tunnels. Lucien propelling Sarah along with inhuman strength. Behind them an alarm blared. Merchants and guards gave chase, fueled by anger at the disruption and a ravenous hunger for blood. Lucien dragged Sarah into a side passage, pressing her against the wall as footsteps thundered past. His body shielded hers, close enough that she could feel the unnerving coldness emanating from him. No heartbeat, no breath, nothing human remained. What did you see? He demanded. Theron, he's synthesizing royal blood somehow. He's your traitor. Lucien's eyes blazed crimson. That's impossible. He'd need access to... He cut himself off, understanding flooding his face. The old blood vaults, the repositories where we stored ancestral essence for emergencies. He's been stealing from you, Sarah said. And now he knows I can detect it. He'll come for me. Then we return to court, and I execute him for treason. No. Sarah grabbed Lucien's arm. He's a general. He'll have supporters, allies. If you move against him openly without proof, you'll start a civil war. Lucien stared at her, surprised. You think like a strategist. I think like someone who survived 17 years on the streets. You don't attack until you know you'll win. For the first time, a flicker of something akin to respect appeared in the Vampire King's eyes. Your ancestor would be proud. Very well. We gather evidence first. But Sarah, his expression hardened. If he suspects you can expose his operation, he won't wait for evidence. He'll move against both of us tonight. In the distance, an explosion reverberated through the tunnels. Screams followed. Lucien's expression turned grim. Or perhaps he already has. They returned to find the court engulfed in flames. Not normal fire, but a fire that burned silver and cold, consuming stone itself, a weapon designed specifically to kill vampires, turning their sanctuary into a death trap. Bodies littered the grand hall. Guards loyal to Lucien, cut down by their own brothers in arms. The bronze doors had been torn from their hinges, and through the smoke, Sarah saw vampires fighting vampires. A civil war erupting in real time. Lyra, Lucien breathed, and then he was moving a blur of shadow and fury. Sarah ran after him, her human legs struggling to keep pace. The marks on her palm burned hotter than ever, pulling her forward, guiding her through the chaos. She dodged a falling chandelier, leaped over a corpse, and burst into the throne room. Theron stood at the center, his sword dripping with blood. Around him stood a dozen generals, vampires Sarah recognized from the council. And at his feet, bound in silver chains that seared her skin, was Lyra. The princess was unconscious, silver blood trickling from fresh wounds. They were draining her. Lucien, Theron's voice boomed. How kind of you to return. I was beginning to think you'd abandoned your daughter. Lucien stood at the entrance, and for the first time, Sarah saw him truly enraged. The temperature plummeted so drastically that frost formed on the walls. His eyes blazed like dying stars. Release her now, and I may grant you a quick death. Death? Theron laughed. Old friend, you still don't understand. This isn't a coup. It's an evolution. Your reign of peace and coexistence has made us weak. Humans study us, hunt us, exploit us. It's time we reminded them why they should fear the night. By spilling your own princess's blood? Sarah shouted, unable to contain herself. You're monsters. Careful, human. Theron's eyes locked onto her. You're the final ingredient we need. Royal protector blood, combined with the princess's essence, will create a serum that grants vampire powers to human soldiers. We'll build an army that can walk in daylight. Vampires without weaknesses. Then we'll take both worlds. The plan's horrifying brilliance struck Sarah like a physical blow. An army of day walkers would be unstoppable. "You'll never succeed," Lucien snarled. "I'll tear you apart myself." "Will you?" Thurin gestured, and his generals formed a circle around Lucien. "You're outnumbered, weakened by the silver fire, and the moment you attack, my men slit your daughter's throat. So here's my offer. Surrender yourself and the girl, and Lyra lives. Resist and watch her die." Lucien's hands clenched into fists. Sarah could see the calculation unfolding in his eyes. He could kill Thurin, maybe even half the generals, but not before they murdered Lyra. He was trapped. "Don't," Sarah whispered. "Don't give up." "I cannot let her die," Lucien said quietly. "She is all I have left of—" He stopped, old pain etched across his face. Sarah understood. Lyra wasn't just his heir. She was the last vestige of someone he'd loved and lost. Surrender meant slavery, but Lyra's death meant the final destruction of his humanity. "Just like my mother," Sarah thought. "She chose death to save me." The mark on Sarah's palm blazed white-hot, and suddenly, she heard that voice again, ancient, powerful, undeniably her ancestor. "You carry more than blood, child. You carry 300 years of accumulated power. Every Arden who served, every oath sworn, every sacrifice made. It all flows through you. You are not just a protector. You are a weapon. Use us." Sarah looked at her hand. The silver scars were spreading, crawling up her arm like living vines, glowing brighter with each passing second. She felt the power building inside her. Not vampire, not human, but something older, the covenant itself made manifest. "I have a better offer," Sarah said, stepping forward. Thurin's laugh dripped with cruelty. What could a homeless child possibly offer? Sarah thrust her hand forward, and the power erupted outward. The mark transformed into wings, massive, crafted from pure silver light, spanning 15 feet on either side. Ancient symbols blazed across her skin, armor forming from solidified covenant magic. Her eyes burned white gold, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 3 centuries. "I am Sarah Arden, sworn protector of the royal line. You have broken sacred law. You have spilled protected blood. By the covenant that binds me, I name you traitor and pass judgment. Death." The word resonated through the chamber like a command from reality itself. Thurin's generals stumbled backward, their faces contorted in agony. The silver chains binding Lyra shattered, and Sarah felt herself moving with impossible speed, her body augmented by every ancestor who'd ever served. She reached Thurin before he could react, her hand closing around his throat. The light from her mark poured into him, and he screamed as the covenant rejected him, his own stolen blood turning to poison in his veins. "You wanted royal blood," Sarah whispered. "Choke on it." Thurin's body convulsed and turned to ash. The remaining generals attacked as one, and the real battle began. The battle lasted 3 minutes. Sarah moved like lightning wrapped in silver fire, the covenant power coursing through her with intoxicating clarity. She didn't just fight, she commanded. When a general lunged, she spoke a word in a language she'd never learned, and his own blood froze solid in his veins. When 2 more attacked from behind, the wings of light swept them aside like insects. But it was Lucien who truly turned the tide. Freed from his paralysis, the Vampire King became a force of nature. He tore through the traitors with centuries of refined brutality, each movement precise and lethal. Where Sarah's power was raw and explosive, his was cold, efficient destruction. Within minutes, the throne room fell silent. Bodies turned to ash littered the floor around them. The survivors fled into the tunnels, and Sarah let them go. The message had been sent. The silver wings faded. Sarah collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. The power drained away, leaving her feeling hollow and impossibly weary. Lucien gently lifted Lyra, cradling her as he had the night they met. The princess's eyes fluttered open. "Father," she whispered, "I'm here." His voice cracked ever so slightly, just enough to reveal the man beneath the king. "You're safe now. Lyra's gaze found Sarah. You saved me again. That's apparently my job. Sarah managed a weak smile. Over the next 3 days, the court slowly began to rebuild. The traitors were hunted down or surrendered. Lucian executed 12 generals, exiled 30 nobles, and completely restructured the council. Word spread throughout both the vampire and human worlds. The old king still had teeth, and the Arden Protector had returned. On the 4th night, Lucian summoned Sarah to the rooftop of the ruined cathedral, the highest point in the underground city, where a shaft opened to the surface, allowing moonlight to stream in. You surprised me, he said without preamble. I expected power. I didn't expect wisdom. Sarah leaned against the crumbling stone wall, utterly exhausted. I'm not wise. I'm just good at surviving. Perhaps they're the same thing. He stood beside her, gazing up at the sliver of sky visible above. Thurin was right about one thing. My reign has made us complacent. The world is changing, and I've been too focused on maintaining the old ways to notice. So change with it, she laughed. A sound she'd never heard from him before. Almost human. If only it were that simple. The vampires who follow me crave isolation. The humans who know of us demand extinction. And he paused. I just want my daughter to see the sun someday without it killing her. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Then stop hiding, Sarah said. Both sides are afraid because they don't understand each other. Show them there's another way. Build something new. And you, Sarah? Lucian turned to face her. Will you stay to see this new world built? Or will you return to your streets? Sarah had been contemplating this very question. The covenant bond had granted her power, purpose, a place in a world that had never wanted her. But it had also chained her to a fate she'd never chosen. I'll stay, she said finally. But on my terms. I'm not your servant, Lucian. I'm your partner. Lyra's protector, yes, but also her friend. Her teacher, maybe, when she's ready to see the human world as more than just prey or subjects. And if I refuse, then I walk away, and you can explain to the Covenant why you rejected the last Arden. She met his ancient eyes without flinching. We both know you need me more than I need you. A smile played across his face. Your ancestor spoke nearly the same words when she first knelt before me. I'm beginning to see why Elena and I argued so much. He extended his hand. Very well, Sarah Arden. Partners. She shook it. The marks on her palm glowed softly, sealing the new agreement. Below them, the court began to assemble. Lucian had called for an assembly, the first dawn ceremony in vampire history. As the sun began to rise, the vampires who'd chosen to follow him stood in the shadows at the cavern's edge, while human diplomats, carefully selected and thoroughly terrified, stood across from them. Lucian descended to address both groups. Sarah stood at his side with Lyra on his other. The princess reached out and took Sarah's hand, squeezing it gently. For 300 years, Lucian began, his voice resonating through the space. We have lived in shadow and fear. No longer. Today, I propose a new covenant, not written in blood and servitude, but in cooperation and understanding. The speech continued, outlining his vision, designated territories, trade agreements, a joint council to handle disputes. It was ambitious, perhaps even impossible, but it was a start. As dawn fully broke, its light spilling down the shaft and stopping just short of where Lucian stood, Sarah felt something shift within her. The weight she'd carried all her life, the feeling of being unwanted, invisible, worthless, lifted. She'd spent 17 years as nobody. Now she was somebody, not because of destiny or bloodlines, but because she'd chosen to be. Lucian knelt, the ancient king bowing to a teenage girl, acknowledging what she represented. Not submission, but respect. The vampires behind him followed suit, a wave of dark figures honoring the protector who'd saved them from themselves. Sarah didn't kneel in return. She stood in the growing light, human and proud, and smiled. The protector has returned, Lucian said, rising to his feet. His eyes met hers, filled with something almost like hope. And so, perhaps, has our future. Sarah looked at Lyra, at the gathered crowds, at the impossible bridge they were trying to build between two worlds. "Then let's get to work," she said. And for the first time in her life, Sarah Arden felt like she was home. The end.